B is there. That I'll just tell you. I think that's quite important. It's not ethnicity, role of NGOs. There's something called EPG Pathshala. Now is not the right time, of course, but if you have time, go through it. I think it's very, very. I think the kind of um, you'll get a lot of examples. You'll get a lot of case studies in OBC. So OBC, I think the general I'll tell. So what? So okay, I'll read the whole thing. Whatever is important, just go through it. Just note it down. So backward communities were used since colonial times, and at some point of time, backward communities also included tribes. So in 1955, 2399 castes were identified, but were actually rejected. So Mandal Commission used 11 indicators. Mandal Commission used 11 indicators and believe. What are the 11 indicators? They can be categorized into 3 subheadings. What are the 3 subheadings? What are 3 subheadings which Mandal Commission used? Social, educational, economic. So Mandal Commission, in identifying backward OBCs, they have also used economic. Whereas in Constitution, economic criteria is not there. They use 11 indicators. I think 4 plus 4 plus 3, something like that. So it was actually, there's a guy called Galanter. Galanter historically shows evidence that OBCs were never clearly defined. In most of the Northeast, there is no OBC list. So many, so this I think in this thing also you can help. So in Bihar, there is OBC, there is also MBC, most backward classes. In Pune and Kolhapur, which was center of non-Brahminical movement, most of the OBC movement were actually pro-West and anti-Brahminical. It is Pai Panindrikar. It says reservation has not been very effective. Chopra says reservation began in this thing. What we can say. OBC population was around 52%, which was identified by Mandal Commission in 1980, but it shrank to 41% according to NSS report. So the OBC population has been decreasing. Supreme Court in A.K. Thakur case says review of OBC should be done after 10 years, which has not taken place. In Karnataka, there has been reservation given for Brahmin Christians, for Kuruba Christians. Marathi Brahmins have been given reservation of OBC. Bairagi Brahmins have been given reservation in this thing in UP. So, what is the question? So this facts I think you could have noted down. So discuss the provisions. We discussed the provisions. What I think 45 right to equality we mentioned 338A. Assess its importance in social mobility. When talking about social mobility, we assess its importance in sanskritization. So because OBC got some protectionist policy, sanskritization has increased or decreased? Decreased. Try to mention some example for that. The idea of dominant caste, because of OBC, there was a thinker, I think by name Anthony or something, he says the idea of caste is actually decreasing, the idea of caste system is actually being disturbed because of reservation to OBC. Because when you give reservation to OBC, there is certain political class which is coming up. It's becoming dominant caste. Caste system is based on the idea of cooperation. But because of reservation, because of giving one advantage to one particular community, caste system which was based on the idea of cooperation is becoming into competition. From cooperation it is becoming to competition. That cooperation between castes is decreasing. So caste system as such, you can say, is changing. The structure of caste system is changing or is being destroyed. Depends on how you see it. Then what else can we talk about social mobility? So we talk about sanskritization. We spoke about this thing. Then sanskritization we spoke, dominant caste we spoke. Then what modernization? What can we talk when it comes to OBCs? Education is being helped because of reservation in OBCs to OBCs, which actually is helping in social mobility. So I think this arguments, the general arguments, if we talk about, I think that should be enough. Critically assess the role of anthropology in rural development. So critically assess the role of anthropology in rural development. So, anyone, how can anthropology, so when such questions come, it is always advisable to identify the unique features of anthropology and try to link it with rural development. So, what are the unique features of anthropology? Fieldwork orientation 1. Next, cultural relativism 2. Idea of holism 3. Action anthropology 4. Applied anthropology 5. So, this every subtopic you mention, elaborate, give an example. You can quote S.C. Dubey. S.C. Dubey was extensively involved in village studies as well as rural development. Who? Shamir Petia. I mean, no, that is village study, but he was also involved in rural development. I think S.C. Dubey was called to Pakistan, if I'm not wrong. He went to Pakistan for development. So mention, cultural relativism you write, give an example. So anything you write, give an example. So 5 or 6 points if you get, then that should be enough. Then at the conclusion, so initially what you say, you can start by this. LP Vidyarthi was very much against economists who were involved in making tribal policies. LP Vidyarthi was very much against it. LP Vidyarthi called anthropologists as doctors, social doctors, who can actually identify and make changes. There Foster's, I think, in Foster's, I think tribal India it is here. Foster's was a person who told why anthropologists have an ease when compared to economists or political scientists in making development, because one, field work is there. Second is they do not judge. Third is they give importance to understanding. Fourth is they go to a community as learners and not as teachers. Foster's told. So initially you are bringing in 3 or 4 thinkers. LP Vidyarthi you bring in, Foster's you bring in. Then you start about this 5, 6 features, cultural relativism, etc. and all this thing. At the end, you can say in national policies it is important to include them. I think who was the first? Buchanan was the first person. British India involved social scientists in order to have greater integration with local natives. It was Buchanan, I think it was 1808 as far as I know. So just it's there in NCERT, new NCERT, just read it. So it is maybe you can make a recommendation saying administration also anthropology can be involved, cultural relativism, such things can be involved. That will give a complete answer. So introduction is again why anthropology is important, different steps, different areas, cultural relativism, etc. How some recommendation. So critically examine the forest policy in India since British period, discuss its impact on tribes. So from when does the forest policy from when does colonial forest policy begin in India? 1855. So Dalhousie who started it. So 1855 policy you write, 1865 policy you write, 78 you write. 78 talks about what does 78 talk about? Trespassers is yes. It talks about reserved forest, protected forest, village forest. 78. Then 1892 policy again. What does it talk about? For the first time, it brings in some concept. Protected, yes. It brings the idea of concession, I think. Rights to concession. So what tribals? So what happened was Britishers did not know the importance of tribes forests. So in 1855 Dalhousie. So what you do in such answers? You can start give a general heading, saying can start with the British did not realize the importance of forest till 1855, something like that. From then, they started slowly encroaching upon the rights of the tribal residents. So give a heading 1855 tribal policy Dalhousie. It was the first time there was some policy towards it, where government showed its right over the forest. 1865 it was implemented. The policy was implemented. 1878 for the first time it came up protected forest. So that protected, reserved, and this thing. For the first time it identified saying earlier tribals thought the whole forest land is their right, but then they told they are not your rights, there are some concessions we are giving you. So they were distinguishing between concession and forest. Then what are the impact on tribal population? So you can start whatever this impacts you can start. There was encroachment from outsiders, large scale cutting, not access to timber, grazing was an issue, shifting cultivation they started this thing. So then there was 1927 tribal policy. So So now 1927 tribal policy, they started giving something called, here there were only privileges, they told concessions. So the access to tribal population was divided into three parts: rights, concessions, and privileges. So these are the rights, these are the concessions, these are the privileges. That's what they started telling. Since British period. So next came after this. Next independence took place. Then when was the first tribal policy of India? 52. So what was the catastrophic changes that took place? There were no private forests. Diversion of forest for anything was stopped. So although we may think diversion was stopped, schools could not be established, hospitals could not be established, roads could not be established. Then they continued with what are the three? Rights, concessions, and privileges. So what is its impact on the people? We just mentioned. After this came the Roy-Burman Committee. So Roy-Burman Committee, he told all these things are not good, etc., etc. Then 1980 policy, 1988 policy, where they recognized for bygas they gave importance. For bygas they gave what rights? Shifting cultivation rights were given, and they recognized the symbiotic relations that take place between the tribals and forest, and with Forest Rights Act 2006. So this you write as well as the impact on tribals. So this I think will 20 marks, 4 pages, you will be able to finish it. At the end, a good conclusion will say what else can be done. What else can be done? So you can also talk about bamboos have not been recognized as trees in non-forest areas. That's a welcome step. So what else can be done? You can just mention. Recently it has come up. So ecotourism they have mentioned, involving the tribals into development they have mentioned. Last year means 65 had come. So this is how you conclude. So you start with British. Every policy, its impact. Policy, impact, mix subheadings. In the ending, what else can be done? So that should complete. Fifth question: examine the relevance of tribal punchil today in the light of emerging development-related practices. So what is tribal punchil? What are the 5? Where was tribal punchil first mentioned? Which book? Philosophy for NIFA. Where was national park concept first mentioned by very relevant? Which book? So you know that, right? Very relevant. First he came up with national park approach. Who opposed national park approach? Not Gurye. Thakkar Bappa. In which lecture did he oppose it? R.R. Kale Memorial lecture, he opposed it. In which book was this mentioned? Philosophy for NIFA is perfect. Okay. So what are the 5 tribal policies? 5 things in tribal policies. One is tribal should develop along their own genius. They should not be over-administered. They should be included in administration. Then the symbiotic relation should be recognized. Which is the 5th one? It should not be based on number of inputs we are giving. So examine the relevance. What is the relevance now in development related practices? You should not over administer is the right question. So how do you write relevance? So first thing what you do is the conclusion I can tell you, the relevant tribal punchil is as relevant as it was earlier, it is before. That is the conclusion. Introduction is tribal punchil, who came up with that, and the 5 provisions. So you have at least 60% of the page to be filled. So you can write a relevance that displaced 60 million or 60%? I think it's 60 million by Walter Fernandez. 60%. 60 million Walter Fernandez. That I remember the name number. And give examples what the government has done. So mention tribal punchil, then each provision how government is implementing it, and what else can be done. I think that should finish 3 pages of your this thing. Tribes in India are not homogeneous group. Again, easy to substantiate. What else can you mention? Homogeneous. Race, language, geography, religion, all these things you mentioned. In between all this, give arguments. Gurye told they are backward Hindus. What did very relevant tell about tribes? Did you not call them birds on trees, something like that? Where you told tribes like something like this? So Guriya you mentioned, very well you mentioned, B.S. Guha, Birja Shankar Guha you mentioned, who talks about that. Who was the person who came up with linguistic classification of Indian subcontinent? Grierson. According to Grierson classification of languages. So here where you have to bring in some proper nouns. Not just mention languages. Mention all these. Grierson you should mention, Birja Shankar, this thing. Geographical classification who has done? And Gurriya has done, no? Vidyarthi has done, I know. So that's what I'm saying. So try to mention their this thing and this. Then at the end you say they're not a homogeneous group, and you can go a step forward and say since they're not a homogeneous group, the policies for administration for governing should not be the same. Something that if you mention, that should conclude the answer. Fifth and sixth schedule of constitution are built on the foundations laid by colonial government. Discuss. The last question. Which was the first act or regulation to govern tribals in India? Is it 1858 or 1784? 1858. No. See, first 1872 was Hamara Scheduled Districts Act. 1873 was Inner Line Regulation. In 18th century there is one regulation where what they did was then came Wilkinson rules. So first was Raj Mahal. So what they did was people who are staying in the fringes of Raj Mahal hills, they gave them money and they told if there are any fights, complain. Then came Cleveland. Cleveland cleverly converted tribal areas into government non-revenue lands. So those tribal areas were converted to government lands, but they did not have to pay revenue. So tribal did not know that their lands are being converted to this thing. So start with Raj Mahal, then Hamara Cleveland, then Wilkinson rules. Wilkinson rules where some rules were let off for those tribal areas. Next is Hamara Scheduled Districts Act, 1872. After that is 1874 Hamara Inner Land Regulation. Then backward tracts, really backward tracts, and at the end exclusive and partially excluded areas. If you write, I think for 20 marker, 2.5 pages will be over, or 3 pages will be over. You should mention, not only this, you should go a step forward. You should say, we have not completely copied what they have told. Who is the thinker who told the tribals were purposely isolated so that they do not understand the freedom movement of India and they don't involve themselves in the freedom movement of India? He says they were isolated not because they are primitive or they are simple societies. They are isolated because they should not get to know what is happening, what Indian National Congress is doing. Because if the tribals get to know what Indian National Congress is doing, they will also involve themselves in freedom struggle, and there will be extra fight we have to fight. So that called Bardhan, A.V. Bardhan as far as I know, Bardhan. So he mentioned this, why they were isolated. Then mention the differences which they had and which we have. What are the differences between 5th and 6th schedule and them? What are the differences? Yes? No, I'm saying British found colonial government and 5th and 6th schedule, what's the difference? So partially excluded and excluded areas and 5th and 6th schedule. They followed a isolationist approach mainly, whereas India presently, at least in 5th schedule areas, is trying to have integrationist approach. There is more importance given to autonomy. Try to mention PISA, whereas they did not want autonomy in their this thing. There is importance being given to conservation of art and culture, conservation of their own socio-cultural practices, whereas there was backdoor support to missionary activities. So these are things you mentioned at the end. So I think this will give a complete answer. This will be a complete answer. Thinkers who we can, I think Bardhan is one thinker you can mention. 5th and 6th schedule. Well, I think Bardhan, Wilkinson rules. I think that's it. I think I did not find any thinkers in this question. I think you mentioned these two and give some arguments. So this is it. So last thing I want to tell you is, see, paper 1 has an advantage of you can mention thinkers. Lots of thinkers you can mention. Everywhere there's Malinowski, everywhere there's. Here there are not many thinkers. So here the crux is linkages. And I'm very sure when you write your paper 2 and you come out, you'll feel what have I written? Because most of the answers will be general answers. Communalism and all answers. For example, they talk about Rina, or they talk about Varnashrama system. So all of us will start writing Varnashrama system. We talk Grasthashrama, Brahmacharya, and all those things. So this is, if you write such things, the issue is everyone will write the same thing. You get below average marks. So second paper, see to that you everywhere mention the present context and mention thinkers, small thinkers according to Manu Dharma Shastra, according to who is that? This is a guy called Paul Davison or some guy who has done. Is he Paul Davison? So try to mention thinkers and present context. Rina is there, present context of Rina. If you are able to link it to the present context, 1 or 2 marks you will get. And this is rural development and all. There was a question. Try to bring in those cultural relativism, holism. If you mention, I think you'll get 1 or 2 marks extra. I think that will add more value. Whenever possible, try to include diagrams. And diagrams need not be flowcharts. We are not. I was not creative enough to make flowcharts. Is always like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a basic flowchart, which will one eat up the space, and second it will add some variation to the monotony of text. I think that's it. Is there anything? Please ask. Please. Any doubts? I'll be happy to address. Otherwise, I think that's it. Don't give controversial misinformation. That's what I'll do. Don't say, see, Walter Fernandez says 60 million have this thing. Don't say Walter Fernandez says 10 million have. Then if you such wrong things, it is always a issue. And thinkers should be given to substantiate. If, for example, dominant caste, there are 5 or 6 thinkers all of us have, right? So there is dominant individual, dominant family, dominant community, dominant families. So dominant individual, family, so such places you can add. But general questions like communism and all, although you bring in thinkers, their value will be added only if you have substantiation. So there's an interesting argument he is giving and substantiation. For example, Dipankar Gupta says ethnicity as a concept emerged in India only because of politics. If there was no politics, there would not be ethnicity. So such interesting out of the world or things which have not been written in such arguments, they'll appreciate it. NGOs again, there is, what is that Devi? Recently, some Devi from West Bengal, she expired. Mahashweta Devi. She expired. So she says, NGOs, you should give in lots of funding. So she goes to the extent of saying NGOs, they should be given funding. They should be involved in planning. So you give them money, give them a small micro area, let them develop, let them implement based on the outcomes. Let say the government make it from micro plan, let them make a micro plan. The Mahashweta Devi says. Say another, but contrary to this, there is another guy called Hanuman Rao who says no, this should not be the case. NGOs should not be involved. They should be more accountable. So leave Hanuman Rao, leave Mahashweta Devi. Without them also, this is a good argument. But when you add those names, it adds more argument. So whatever you are doing in paper 2, whatever arguments you are studying, see to it that you attach 1 or 2 names. When you attach those names, it adds some value. And let it not be completely, for example, if I say B.S. Guha would not have spoken about sociocultural anthropology. So when you are doing that, do not cross. You cannot mention Franz Boas and genetics. So be intelligent and don't cross a lot. But basic LP Vidyarthi and all you can just manage. Okay? Yes, sir. Anthropology or general? Anthropology, na? How many of you are preparing for next year? Okay. Have they started classes? They have started classes, huh? From what have they started? Theories, huh? Okay. see what I've seen the mistakes. Okay, I'll tell what mistakes generally people, student of anthropology does. Generally, most of us know the scoring areas, which is the scoring area in paper 1, genetics of physical anthropology. The mistake we do is any physical anthropology which comes, we mention pure biology. Pure biology we mention. Genetics, put it with biology, put it with numbers, facts, etc. Let us know we should all remember that the person who is correcting there is not BSc graduate, as far as I know. That they have done the BA and they have done the MA in anthropology. BA generally in BA sociology and all they must have taken. So too much of putting anthropology, biology related things will not help. So for who is studying, unfortunate thing what's happening in coaching centers is when they say physical anthropology, they teach only biology. So see to it that you bring in lots of case studies. So if there is a question on inbreeding, we all talk about gene frequency, genetic frequency and all those things. Yes, but your major crux should be study of Imbaraj, study of Shias, study of Tamil Brahmins in India by, I don't know, Imbaraj and some person. So according to their study this has happened, according to this study this has happened. So you will be able to mix linkages. From where will you get these examples? You'll get these examples from what I did was EPG Pathshala. There you get lots of examples, one. And IGNO notes, I heard, has lots of case studies where you'll be able to mix both of them. So linkages are possible only through case studies. I remember in there is this thing, right? Chapter 10, growth, factors that affect growth. So EPG Pathshala is very good examples. It says Sweden, some person who took children and two sets of children, and one set of children he exposed them to sunlight during summer, whereas in Sweden there is no summer, exclusive summer, sunlight is less. So they had 2 centimeters increase in height, it seems. And that is one. Again, one was environment, factors affecting environment. We just talk about environment, we don't give case studies. So there's one study where women who smoke and pregnant women who smoke, the children are 1 centimeter short, it seems. So these interesting case studies will add value than writing pure biology. So see to it that you mix both. Give a lot of importance to physical anthropology because that's scoring. Socio-cultural again is lots of quoting and lots of examples. You have to quote a lot. I've seen people quoting even the page numbers and editions of books. I've actually seen it. So that much is not required, but at least wherever you're quoting Morgan, Boas, Malinowski, you should quote the books from which it has been taken. So functionalism, in which book, Argonauts of Western Pacific, and all you have to just quote. That is next. Try to include lots of figures and lots of statistics in your answers. The more statistics, the more authoritative it gets. Apart from that, paper 2, we have enough good notes. I'm seeing a trend where paper 2, which was generally termed more tribal India specific, is becoming more Indian society specific. So if possible, caste system and all, if you have some friends from sociology, try to read it. Or there is a book by named Ramahuja book is there. So there, caste related things, there is 1 or 2 units of caste related things, read them. Because it will give, because last time there was a question, caste system is not a social stratification, there was some question on that. Caste is not stratification, caste is not a hierarchy, caste is not stratification, and there are some, this thing. What? Louis Dumont. So that pure impure thing was there, but that is there in Indian anthropology, nothing was there. But a better analysis is there in Ramahuja's book. So read Ramahuja, that 2 specific units. If you read it, I think that should be enough. Kaka report should be in your fingertips. Again, I'm telling you. Kaka report, draft tribal policy, annual tribal report of MOTA's annual report. Then applied anthropology actually is good. When you're giving some, say, when I talk about Sahay, I'll mention this that Christianity as an agency in Sahay, in an article, Christianity as an agency of tribal welfare, tells that Christianity helped in reducing female discrimination. So I can just say, because of Sahay told, Christianity led to decrease in female discrimination. But if you mention this article, there is more authority. So try to mention these are quotes and all mention. And you mentioned, say, who is that? R.R. Kaleyaru, who is that person? Thakkar Bappa. Thakkar Bappa was against national park approach. All of you must be knowing what is national park approach. So if you mention Thakkar Bappa in R.R. Kale Memorial Lecture told that he is opposing national park approach, that adds more value. So small things we just try to incorporate. General things like OBC, caste system, and all those things, OBCs especially, or nation state, or role of anthropology, try to include lots of examples. If you do this, I think it will add more. Paper 2 will be all general questions. If you add more value, if you add these proper nouns, you will have more extra marks. That's what I've realized. I think that's it. Anything else? Okay then. Thank you.